Hey everyone, and welcome back to What's the Plan, the podcast where we dive into the matters of our careers in the architecture and urban planning field. I'm Hayley.
And I'm Andrea. So Hayley, what's the plan this week?
This week's plan is all about Bill 109.
Yes, so with the election coming up, we thought we'd cover the controversial bill that the Ford government has introduced back in March.
Controversial?
Controversial in the fact that many politicians, city planners, and critics have quite the opposing views on whether or not the bill is a good step, or as I quote a local city councillor, irresponsible and disappointingly immature response.
That is quite a reaction.
Yeah, I'll just leave this counselor nameless and you guys can figure it out yourselves.
I mean, if our listeners want to search it, I guess they can.
Yeah, you can take that direct quote and just insert it into Twitter.
So, Andrea, why don't you talk about what Bill 109 is?
Yeah, so introduced on March 30th of 2022, Bill 109, also called More Homes for Everyone, proposes targeted policies for the immediate term that make housing fair for hard-working Ontarians and make it faster to build the homes that the families need and deserve.
So, how does this legislation actually make housing fair for everyone?
Yeah, so before I get into the nitty-gritty details, it should be noted that this bill is more of an amendment to 5 pieces of existing legislation.
Okay.
As a response to the Ontario Housing Affordability Task Force report's 55 recommendations released on February 8th, 2022.
Okay.
Yeah, so these 5 pieces of legislation are 1, the City of Toronto Act 2006.
Okay.
Secondly, the Development Charges Act of 1997.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, from a long time ago. Third, the New Home Construction Licensing Act, which is created in 2017.
Okay.
And also the Ontario New Home Warranties Plan Act, as well as the Planning Act.
Okay.
So since there is a lot of changes, I will try my best to summarize them as short and sweet as possible, but buckle up. So the first amendment is refunds for application fees. So what this is it requires municipalities to gradually refund application fees to applicants who do not receive a decision on their zoning bylaw amendments or site plan applications within the legislated timelines.
Right.
Yeah, so this would apply to applications made on or after January 1st, 2023.
Okay.
So what exactly this timeline is, they didn't explicitly say, but say that like typically maybe it takes like a month for cities to respond on these bylaws. If they do not respond within a month, they have to refund the application process. And I don't know if that means like the application has to restart, but basically you don't have to pay again to get it reviewed.
Okay.
So like you would only pay once for the actual successful process. Whereas right now you pay as many times as necessary. Yeah, so another major change is to the Community Infrastructure and Housing Accelerator tool.
Okay.
And by establishing a new Community Infrastructure and Housing Accelerator, CHA tool for municipal requests to expedite zoning outside of the Greenbelt area.
Okay.
Another is that there's a whole section to this actually. It's ministerial approval, and this includes appeals, referrals, and time suspensions. So under this change, the minister shall issue guidelines governing the scope of how this authority may be used, and the guidelines would need to be put in place before an order could be made. Okay. So it feels like it's giving the Minister of Housing a bit more approval or power in order to make things work or progress faster. So another aspect is provide the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing with new discretionary authorities when making decisions. For example, they can now, quotation marks, stop the clock. Okay. Which is giving them ability to say that they can request for more time if it's needed to just decide on all official plan matters to subject to minister's approval. And this includes like things that are currently in transition for matters that are currently before the minister, so that things that they do not necessarily look at right now, but if it was to be brought to them. Okay. Another part of this greater authority given to them is to refer all or parts of an official plan matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal for a recommendation, as well as forward all of an official plan matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal to make a decision. So basically, if they can't decide, they can pass it along to this this group of people to help decide the matter as well.
Mm-hmm. And also for our planning listeners, or our listeners who are familiar with the planning process in Ontario, the Ontario Land Tribunal, the OLT, is like a board of people who oversee cases. And so with this being said, it would take up a lot more time to actually go through.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like the more people that has the ability to make an input, it's like usually it takes more time to discuss. Another major change this bill brings is to site plans.
Okay.
And the change requires decisions on site plan application to be delegated to staff for applications made on or after July 1st, 2022.
Okay.
And the other part is that it will extend site plan application reviews from 30 to 60 days.
Giving the government more time to review it?
Yeah, giving them more time to review it. So similar to the previous part where like you're giving more people input, it's like once again this step is also getting stretched out.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and as well for site plans is to establish regulation making authority to prescribe complete application requirements for site plan applications.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what they mean by like establish a regulation, since like shouldn't there be already a set of regulations? But
yeah,
we shall see. Another aspect that is being changed is to surety bonds, and is to establish regulation making authority to authorize landowners and applicants to stipulate the type of surety bonds and other prescribed instruments to be used to secure obligations in connection with land use planning approvals.
Can you describe what a surety bond is?
From the sounds of it, it's like there's sort of some agreement that like for you to get this land, you must be able to provide X, Y, Z.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And as well as draft plans and last plans of subdivision is being amended. And they will be establishing another regulation making authority to prescribe what cannot be required as a condition of subdivision approval.
Right, okay.
As well as establish a one-time discretionary authority to reinstate draft plans of subdivision that have lapsed within the past 5 years. And this is subject to consumer protection provisions.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think this is for like to make it easier for people who have a big pile of land that currently only have like one house sitting on it, to divide that and to build more affordable homes. And another aspect that is being modified is the community benefits charges and parkland contributions.
Okay.
And they'll be establishing another group of regulation making authority to require public reporting on development applications and approvals. And they will require municipalities with a community benefits charge, also known as a CBC, bylaw to undertake and complete a review, including consulting publicly on their bylaw at least once every 5 years.
Okay.
So the idea is to like open it up to the community members so they're more aware of what's happening. And the last major change is the implementation of a tiered alternative parkland dedication rate for transit-oriented communities, and to provide increased certainty of parkland requirements. So basically what this states is for sites less than or equal to 5 hectares, parkland would be dedicated up to 10% of the land or its value.
Okay.
As well as for sites greater than 5 hectares, parkland would be dedicated up to 15% of the land or its values.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, you can't just use 100% of your land for whatever you plan to do. And this encumbered parkland could be identified through an order by the Minister of Infrastructure as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, by the sounds of it, Bill 109 has quite a bit tied into it.
Yes.
So why don't you start off and tell us what Bill 109, or sorry, can you start off by telling us how Bill 109 affects the architecture industry?
Yeah, so from my understanding of the bill, I think there's 3 major impacts on the architectural process or design process of construction. Of buildings as well, and the first one would be the refunds of application fees. So currently it takes a long time for SPA approvals and all that kind of stuff, and based on how your application process works, is that there is a dedicated amount of time. Yeah. And if you do not get a response within that time, it's like you already paid for it. However, you don't get a review. So if you want to get another review or someone else to look at it, you have to pay again. So by removing these fees, or maybe having the cities refund the applicants, it lower costs for zoning bylaw amendments. And in turns, I think that means like it's a reduction of barriers for home types that are currently illegal, and to allow people to build more different types of housing.
Okay. So that would be a positive
Yeah,
change.
I think that's one positive change. One negative change would be the extended SPA review process.
Right.
Means a longer timeline from permit to tender. And like depending on this, like the size or the scope of your project, this could mean like weeks delayed, or maybe even months delayed.
Okay.
And like this leaves a lot of projects in limbo, where like for us on the architecture side, it's like we cannot move forward to like continue working on construction drawings if we don't even know if our site plan is being approved.
For sure. Okay.
Yeah, and in turn it also like slows down or delays the tender process. And then another aspect or another impact to architecture is the community infrastructure and housing accelerator tool. Personally, I have like mixed feelings about this.
Okay.
I think in theory, this tool helps speed up the development of suburbs. But I think in the end, that just kind of speeds up like urban sprawl.
For sure. Yeah.
So it's like it's a good tool, but if in the wrong hands, it could be used in the wrong way. Yeah. So what about planning? How does this bill affect the planning process?
So I think the last note you just made,
Yeah.
in theory, Bill 109 is a good idea.
Yeah.
You know, putting legislation in place with goals to expedite the planning process to create more homes and hopefully mitigate the housing crisis. That all sounds so good, and it sounds like what we need. But the bill just means an increased provincial jurisdiction on local planning processes and decisions.
Yes.
And that's an issue because planning at the municipal level should be governed by the municipal government, municipal jurisdiction, and allowing the province to make decisions on local planning matters would only work well if every municipality operated in the exact same way.
Yes.
And if the province would also take responsibility for the things within the municipal planning process that goes wrong as well. And with that being said, Bill 109 also penalizes municipalities for decision-making that aren't entirely in their control. Yeah. And within the planning approval process, there are so many key players responsible that take part in the process and throughout the process, so that the onus should not only be placed on the municipality just because they're the ones with the decision to approve or not. Yeah. And that also ties into the cost of new development being shifted from developers to taxpayers in the situation that these timelines are not met based on the refunds that you mentioned. Yeah. And another really big way that this affects the planning process is that as a result, municipalities are forced to reduce or even altogether eliminate important aspects of the planning process, including opportunities for public input. Yeah. Because as you mentioned earlier, if all of the official plan matters go to the OLT, then that becomes like a case, and private opinions no longer have that big of an impact. And well, then where do the voices go? Like who listens to the people who are actually affected by new development? Yeah. And those are definitely not good things.
Yeah. So I think it's safe to say, like, overall, the changes would primarily benefit businesses that are in the industry by expediting development approval processes, as well as increasing certainty and removing barriers and enabling more timely decisions. And it's a good first step. However, it is not aggressive enough in comparison to what was suggested.
Yeah, not at all.
So I know that a large issue with Bill 109 is that a lot of the recommendations from the Housing Affordability Task Force wasn't addressed. So what are some of the recommended items in the Housing Affordability Task Force that is missing in Bill 109?
So one key recommendation that the Housing Affordability Task Force suggested, which Bill 109 didn't include is the proposal to ban zoning rules, which currently exclude anything but single-family homes
Yes.
in large areas of the province's cities,
Yeah.
which, in my opinion, is contradictory to what the bill is about.
Yeah.
Because, as you mentioned, the bill is also more homes for everyone. But if the province is still allowing zones to only accept single-family homes, then how does that really provide more homes for everyone?
Yeah, so essentially it's not equitable.
Exactly.
Because you're only allowing a certain demographic of people that can afford those single-family homes to have more housing.
Exactly. And it's definitely not a good way to utilize lands if it's just single-family homes.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, it encourages sprawl
Yeah.
as opposed to building up.
Yeah.
So ultimately, from what we've talked about, Bill 109 seems to only be looking at the housing crisis from a single, very narrow lens, which is going to create many more problems than it intends to solve.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, in theory, it sounds very good, but there's definitely a lot more tweaks that need to be done to make sure that the bill actually leads to what it intends to do and actually provide more homes for everyone.
Yeah. So with that in mind, I think that we have to really assess who is running for the election, what each party is bringing to the table that can help benefit and actually make this bill actually a fairer and more equitable opportunity for people to get housing.
And cutting the red tape is not the answer to the housing crisis, especially when the root cause of the crisis isn't actually addressed.
In addition, the penalty-based approach to the development process is concerning, and it puts the responsibility on the wrong key players.
Exactly. So, overall, understanding what Bill 109 is the plan for now, and learning how we can improve it to become more equitable and actually provide more homes
is the goal.
Listen to our next episode to continue figuring it out with us.
Thanks for following on to this episode. If you liked it, please give us a like, review, and subscribe for more. Until then, follow us on Instagram at What's the Plan Podcast for what the next plan is.